So in our second session, we're going to shift our focus to men's mental health, looking at how we can better support fathers and men more broadly to build resilience, strengthen connection, and feel empowered to seek help when they need it. One of the biggest things in research around men's health is that lack of help-seeking behaviour. So for men to know that it's okay to seek help and that vulnerability is not actually a sign of weakness. So we're going to have a keynote from Australia's first Special Envoy for Men's Health, MP Dan Rapakoli, and he's going to talk about his insights into the challenges that men face from a policy standpoint, and then we're going to invite the men's mental health panel to the stage. So fabulous to read Dan's CV and see that he represented Australia at the Olympics not only once, not twice, not 3 times, 5 times, and was also a fitter and turner, and so has had that combination of being up there on the global stage but also working down with men in all sorts of situations. So please put your hands together and welcome our first Special Envoy, Dan Rapakoli.
Thank you, Arnie, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Aurora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples with us here today. I also want to acknowledge for tens of thousands of years, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities have understood the importance of family, kinship and the role fathers play in raising children. There's a lot we can learn from that, and I want to start by thanking the Fathering Project. The work you do seriously, genuinely changes lives. You're strengthening families, backing dads, and improving outcomes for kids right across this beautiful country. The leadership, the research, the programs, and the people behind it are making real differences, and it deserves recognition and a massive round of applause. As Australia's first Special Envoy for Men's Health, I've spent the last 10 months getting out there right across this beautiful country, talking to people doing this work. I've been to big cities, I've been to regional towns, I've been to rural towns, and I've been to extremely remote communities. I've sat down with dads, with families, with health workers and community organisations. I've seen where things have been working really well, but I've also seen where things are falling extremely short. And what really stands out is the difference that early support, the right services and strong local leadership can make. I've spoken with researchers, practitioners, frontline workers and fathers themselves. And no matter where I go, there's a common thread. People care deeply about this. There's a shared belief that fathering matters, not just for men, but for families, for communities and the system as a whole. Across that work, a pretty clear picture has emerged about where men's mental health is at in Australia. We're heading in the right direction in so many ways. There's more awareness, better advice, and stronger focus on prevention and early support. But at the same time, there is clearly some pretty large gaps that need to be fixed as well, especially when it comes to how our systems engage men, and in particular dads, at the key point of their lives. I've heard from dads who want to be there more, but are finding it tough to juggle work and family. I've heard from practitioners doing incredible work without always having the resources they need. And I've seen organisations, like all of yours here today, stepping up and filling the gaps that a system hasn't quite caught up with yet. That's why this summit matters. It brings all of that together. It's not just about sharing research, it's about building leadership. It's about shaping policy and systems. It's about changing the way we talk about fatherhood in this country. When you get researchers, policymakers, practitioners, and dads all in the same room, that's when things start to move in the right direction. We can see that's working, call out what's not, and actually build some momentum for change. At the end of the day, that's what this is all about. Better outcomes for kids, families, and communities. We now have got more evidence than we ever have before. Fathers today are engaged. They genuinely care. They want to be present in their kids' lives. Most dads say they enjoy caring and feel confident in doing it. That's a really strong starting point. But at the same time, a lot of fathers still feel held back. Not because they don't want to step up, but because the system around them hasn't quite caught up just yet. There's a bit of tension there. Dads see themselves as carers, but they're still often expected to be provider first and foremost. And that matters because how we define fatherhood shapes how it actually plays out in real life. From a policy and systems point of view, this links directly to men's health and men's mental health. Becoming a dad is a big moment and a major life-changing moment. There's responsibilities, there's pressures, there's vulnerabilities that come with it. There's millions of fathers across this beautiful country, and every year, hundreds of thousands of men step up into that role for the very first time. We all know how a significant number of dads experience anxiety or depression around that time. But the reality is, we're not routinely picking up on that. And that tells us something pretty important. There's a gap between what men need and how our systems are set up. At the same time, this is a massive opportunity for all of us. Fatherhood is one of the best chances we have to engage in men early. It's a point where men are more likely to show up, ask a few questions, and actually connect with some services. Most of the time, dads will see a GP in that first year. That's a window where we can make a real difference. But too often, dads are treated as being on the sidelines instead of being active parents. And that limits what we can achieve. If we support fathers early, we get better outcomes right across the board. For men and their partners and their kids. That's why we're seeing a stronger focus on this at a national level. There's growing recognition that fatherhood is a key life stage when it comes to men's health. We're seeing that reflected in policy and programs and actually in investment. Parental mental health and starting to better include dads and non-birthing partners. There are more practical supports reaching fathers in ways that actually fit into their lives. And there's a stronger collaboration across government, health and community organisations. We're also continuing to build on the evidence base because good policy needs to be backed by solid data and real-world experience. All of this points to a broader shift, a shift towards getting in early, a shift towards prevention, a shift toward recognising fatherhood as a key opportunity to support men's health. But there's no question there needs to be more done, and there is more to do. Families are under pressure. The cost of living is a massive issue. Work-life balance is a real challenge for a lot of people, including myself, may I say. And not many parents feel like they've actually got enough time for caregiving. That all shapes how we care and the care that happens in the home. We still see women more likely to cut back work and men more likely to work more hours and do more overtime, even when families want something different. This has real impacts on wellbeing, relationships and long-term outcomes. It also shows that it's not just about whether supports exist, it's about whether it actually works for families in practice. So the question is, what do we do next? There's a real opportunity to properly embrace fathers' inclusive approaches across the system. Health services, family services and social support need to actively bring dads into the picture, not treat them as an add-on. And workplaces matter too. Flexible parental leave and workplace culture all play a big role in whether dads can present at home. When workplaces get it right, families benefit. When they don't, something else has to unfortunately give. There's also a strong case for more joined-up prevention-focused policy, supporting men earlier, especially when they become dads, can have long-term benefits for everybody involved. That means better connection between GPs, community services and family supports, so dads don't actually fall through the cracks. It also means systems working together, not in silo. We've also got to shift the conversation. Policy can set things up, but culture is really what drives this behaviour. We need to normalise dads as caregivers. We need young boys and men to grow up seeing care as part of who they are. We need to make sure the support reaches everybody. There is still clear gaps for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander fathers, dads in regional areas, dads from culturally diverse backgrounds and dads with a disability. Closing those gaps means working closely with communities and organisations that know them best, because they're the ones with the relationships and the trust to make this happen. What's clear is that fatherhood in Australia is changing. Dads are more involved than they ever used to be. Being hands-on is becoming the norm. But the system hasn't fully caught up yet. And that's what this summit is really about. Closing the gap, turning evidence into action, and building the kind of momentum that leads to real practical changes. Because when we support fathers, we support families. And when we support families, we build stronger communities. From my own point of view and my own perspective on this, I have two beautiful daughters, Zoe, who is about to turn 13, and Asha, who is about to turn 11. And I work in a very demanding job, and as being the first special envoy for men's health, we are working hard to get this out there, to have these conversations, to listen to all the different dads groups out there, all the different mums groups out there, all the different health groups out there for men and women, to see what we can actually do better. And unfortunately for me, that takes me away from my beautiful girls and my beautiful wife. So all these statistics that I've seen here so far this morning, that is exactly what my wife is going through. My wife is the number one caregiver, without a doubt, in my family because of my role in what I do. I'm extremely proud of my role in what I do, and especially in this work in men's health, as first of all, this being the first position ever been done by an Australian government to have somebody actually talking about men's health. So we can go and have these conversations. But with that, I also miss so much from my family. So it is a double-edged sword for me in this role, and it's a sword that I am trying to navigate, as well as my team and my lovely wife and my kids as well. So there is huge benefits that will come from this, but there is also, unfortunately, some side effects too. And my daughters, I do my best when I'm there to make sure that I am caregiving correctly and looking after them as best I can. But it is challenging, and this is the exact situation that millions of dads right across this country face every single day. So we need to continue to work with all the groups in this room. We need the amazing women in this room as well to be up there and talking with the dads, with the parents, with the fathers, with the uncles as well, with so many other caregivers that are males in this space. It's not just fathers. There is so many other caregivers in this space as well that don't get to do enough because of their work commitments and because of so many other things as well. So thank you for all the work you all do, and thank you for everyone that I have met so far in my role, for giving me the insights into what you all go through. because I genuinely want to see change in this whole fatherhood and this whole men's health space. And if we can do that together with men and women, if we can have stronger women, stronger men, we're going to have much stronger communities. And that all starts with conversations like this. So thank you very much for letting me be part of this, and keep up the great work that you all do. Cheers.
Thank you, Dan. I'd like to invite our panellists for our next session up to the stage, beginning with Dr. Ian Zajac, who is a clinical psychologist and breakthrough research fellow in suicide prevention. And if you'd like to come up, please, that'd be great. Oh, there you are. Thank you. At Flinders University, his research is focused on men's mental health and suicidality, and he examines concepts including masculinity, identity, and social expectations to understand how these shape men's lives. Welcome, Ian. Thank you. Also like to welcome Ben Alexander, co-founder at Running for Resilience and former Wallabies player. Got some great sportsmen in the room, which is fantastic. Ben is a leadership and wellbeing advocate known for his work supporting men to build emotional resilience and connection. Thank you, Ben. Welcome. And finally, Shaun Chandran, who's a psychologist. Hey, Shaun. Regional Director of Therapeutic Services at the Australian Childhood Foundation in Western Australia, and Community Father of the Year 2024. Thank you and welcome. I'll leave it to you fellas.
Yeah, I think we've got slides somewhere. Clicking. Which button is this one? So, I think the idea of me coming up first today was to give a bit of a crash course in men's mental health and fatherhood and mental health. And it's really hard to talk about mental health and not have a bit of a kind of doom and gloom vibe about it. So I do want to emphasise at the end that we'll talk a little bit about the positive attributes of fatherhood and the opportunities that we have moving forward. If we look at men's mental health at a top level across Australia, what we know from the data, and all of the data I mentioned today, is AIHW, ABS, those kind of population level statistics, because they vary a lot across studies. But in any year, around 18% of men will experience a mental health disorder, with the most common disorders being depression and anxiety. The reality around this, though, is we know from our own research that we are underdiagnosing mental health issues in guys, primarily because they talk about it differently and they show up at different points in time, if they show up at all. I'll cover off on that. And even for things like depression, we'll see more externalised behaviour, so irritability, anger, risk-taking, drug abuse, those sorts of issues. What I tend to see in anxiety presentations in the clinic is more like panic disorder than a traditional kind of generalised anxiety disorder. That's largely because guys show up late in the piece, where they've had this kind of niggle in the background for a long time, full-blown panic, crisis mode. Now I need to see someone. A little bit too little too late in that kind of framework. So slightly more than 20%, I think, is a pretty good estimate of the annual kind of prevalence of disorders. Half of these guys will have recurrent episodes throughout their life. At least one, usually it's recurrent multiple times. And it usually happens in the context of life stresses that just become a little bit too much. And what we're seeing also, particularly now, is problematic pornography usage kind of bubbling alongside the background of these disorders. And for clinicians in the room, I'd hazard a guess that it's something that you don't really ask about as much as you should be. And some of the data now sort of shows up to 50% of guys with depression are using pornography at problematic levels, and they're not telling you. So what about dads? About 1 in 10 will experience depression during the first year of fatherhood. But there's also evidence that, again, guys who experience depression in that first year of fatherhood will display it in very atypical ways. So they won't say, I'm sad. They won't say, I'm hopeless. They won't say, I'm not motivated. Again, they'll be irritable, frustrated, probably using alcohol a lot more than they were before. disengaging from family and disengaging from parenting roles. And these are all indicators that they're not doing very well. The early child rearing years have particularly heightened risk for this, and that's because of the just global pressure of needing to show up every day, all of the time, and not really getting a break from that. And for guys, it's about shifting across multiple roles. As an employee, as a father, as a partner, as a son, as a friend, and then also trying to find time for themselves. We do know that those who have mental health challenges in kind of fatherhood, their kids go on to have poor outcomes, and this is largely to do with the extent to which they're invested in quality parenting, because they generally are going to withdraw from that parenting role when they're not doing well. One of the guys that I've worked with in the past sort of described his journey into fatherhood like walking on ice, okay? So you can hear it creaking and cracking, there's a lot of pressure, you've got to keep moving forward. Chances are it's not going to break, okay? Also, there's a reasonable possibility that it is going to crack. And that's kind of how he articulated this, this constant sort of pressure and need to keep moving whilst being fully aware at any moment there could be a real sort of bad outcome for him. So what tips a dad over the edge? I'd love to say we have really clear evidence of the very specific things that we should look for, and there are few that include young age, financial pressures being primary drivers, and mental health history. We don't much see prior symptomology of mental health as being a key predictor of what happens after you transition to fatherhood, but a general background of mental health is a risk factor. One of the less talked about issues is relationship quality and relationship strength. So when you are going to go through a stressful period with a partner and you can't communicate well, you guys are not on the same page, you can't express your own needs and set boundaries in terms of how each of you can keep functioning well, it gets way more difficult than it needs to be. And the reality is that when it comes to relationships, we all expect to be able to do them really well, but we never really taught how to do them very well. And a lot of people don't have very good models of what to do well. So when it's already doing not great, add a couple of kids on top of it, it's going to be a disaster. But any number of these things can be problematic. So this is a spaghetti plot showing depression symptoms before fatherhood and then about a year after. The reason I wanted to show you this is the plot on the left, higher scores means higher levels of depression before you were a father. Some of the guys who were very much in a depressive episode before becoming a father dropped right down, right? For no other reason that we're aware of. Who knows? But they go from really, really symptomatic to doing pretty good. But you can flip to the plot on the right and you'll see the inverse of that. Some guys who have scores of, 2 or 3 on, this is a PHQ depression scale, go up to 19, 20, 21. Like these are huge, huge changes in scores. And the conclusion from this is that it's just a mess. Okay, so those factors that I told you predict whether you do well or not, they predict a little bit, okay, but they're not criteria for doing better or worse because everyone's journey is very different. So when it comes to mental health care, men do access mental health care at lower rates than women. And from the analysis of the Better Access scheme, Medicare scheme, we know that the rates of utilisation have not changed for guys. Okay, so they're going up for certain populations and certain demographics, but for guys they're just stale. So guys are getting care plans at much lower rates than females, and they're accessing care at much lower rates. It's not changing, and the number of sessions they access is a lot lower as well. So the outcomes they get from our current systems are not good enough. It's not because they're not showing up in primary care settings. If you look across the data in terms of men and women attending a GP appointment, the difference is really not that great. Especially once you take out, when you take out pregnancy visits and those sorts of issues in that 15 to 44 year bracket, the difference again becomes not great. So guys are showing up in the GP clinic really quite frequently, and they're not getting anywhere when it comes to care that they need. And we've published data that shows guys who have undiagnosed depression leverage GP visits very, very frequently and still don't get a diagnosis. So they are showing up, but our systems are not responding appropriately. This is data out of the recent Movember report around fatherhood. And I think what it shows is increased recognition of the importance of fathers to play a role of fatherhood and fathering and show up as a parent. But when it comes to asking about men and how they're going individually in terms of mental health, it shows that that's where we fall off. And there's been a massive increase in terms of how important fathers are, how to do those roles effectively, but we're still missing the point of how important this male is outside of the role of fatherhood in terms of individually, how are you going? Okay? So fathering, those sorts of things, there's been massive changes, but we need to lean into the space of the individual and make sure that we're checking in with how they're going so we can have better outcomes. Like I said, it is not all doom and gloom. So first-time fathers are actually less likely to experience depression than matched peers, so people who aren't transitioning to fatherhood. They tend to not have a difference in terms of their physical outcomes, okay? And some guys actually really lean into the fatherhood space and focus more on their health, focus on how they're showing up for other people, focus on their relationships, and really kind of lean into the idea of an identity shift, which is who am I as a man and a father and a whatever else now. Broadening your identity is something that many guys do when they move into fatherhood. Some do it really well, some not so well. So what we need to do moving forward is continue to build father-inclusive systems, but we need to build systems that men will actually use, right? This is a massive thing. Guys are not using systems that are available for a range of reasons. A lot of us are to do with money and availability of services when you need it. So in the recent fuel crisis, I'll call it, inquiries at our clinic in Adelaide, which is a male-focused clinic, have gone down 70%. All right? Guys just don't have the money for it now. On top of that, a lot of them can't come in between the hours of 9 and 5. So we have real issues outside of whether men want care, okay, that we need to fix in order to get them into care. We need to identify risk early and not treat fathers as a single group. Like I showed in that spaghetti plot, you could go in any direction once you become a dad. We need to have checkpoints to make sure that we're ensuring that you're supported and transitioning well and making sure that you're not going down a path of a mental health issue. And we need to use fatherhood as that lever for change because it is an opportunity to do things differently, to rewrite how you father relative to how you were fathered, for example. And given it's a fathering conference, that is me on the left when I was a rock star. 1998, actually. Had my first son when I was 18. And I had every single one of those risk factors. And nobody ever checked in. So not a lot has changed in that regard. Lots has changed in terms of fathering and why it's important and how to do it. That wasn't the case 27 years ago. But we're still not at that point of checking in other ways that really matter. And these are my boys now. One who lives in Sydney, actually, so I get to see him, which is great. But that's me done. Happy to talk after.
Cheers, Ian. Thanks to Maddie and the team for inviting me today. A huge honour to speak about something really means a lot to me, and really appreciate the opportunity to come and share sort of what I've learned in my journey retiring from professional sport and trying to build a career or a new career while supporting a young family, and how that's all shaped sort of how I look at mental health. So we'll get into it. Right, so while I was playing, one of my favourite teammates I played with was a guy by the name of Dan Vickerman. We played 2011 World Cup together, and we were in the engine room for the Wallabies. And we really bonded. We didn't play much together. He played for New South Wales and I played for the Brumbies, but we really bonded over an injury. So Dan had broke his leg really badly the year before the World Cup, and he played that World Cup with a metal pole in his leg, which was a similar injury I did 6 years earlier while I was a bit younger, and I'd made a full recovery, but Vix would always ask me about the injury and how we sort of, how I sort of recovered. And he really, anyway, he played the house down that tournament somehow. And he was someone I really looked up to, and really what I sort of thought was someone who was mentally tough. But sadly, Dan retired the next year, 2012, and 5 years after that took his own life. And that was despite, he had tons of career opportunities. He'd studied at Sydney University, Cambridge, had a wife, amazing kids. And it really broke my sort of understanding of mental health and the challenges in retirement, because I thought as when you retire, it was all about trying to get a job. But I was like, Vix had tons of job opportunities, so that didn't make sense. Anyway, and that sort of, I didn't really understand what the term sort of mental health meant. And the reason why, before Vix's death a few years prior, I'd started really struggling while I was playing. And it started when I got sent off in the biggest match of my life in 2013. We're playing the British and Irish Lions. They come out to Australia once every 12 years, right? So you lose a grand final, you can come back next year. You lose a World Cup, you can come back in 4 years. But a Lions series, it really is once in a lifetime opportunity. And I got sent off and we lost. And I really struggled and sadly never enjoyed my rugby again. And a big part of the reason I think that why that was is because I'd let my whole identity become Ben the footballer, and how I felt about myself really rose and fell with how I played. Anyway, I didn't talk about it to anyone. I just thought, this is my shit to deal with and carry on. Didn't speak to anyone, but it was really struggling internally, and I sort of couldn't really articulate why, but I thought it might be this mental health thing. And any time I'd see an article on Fox Sports about a Olympian or a sportsman struggling in retirement, I'd always click on it and read to learn more, because I remember thinking, shit, Ben, this retirement thing sounds pretty tough. You're struggling while you're still playing. What's going to happen to you when you retire? So I'd start trying to understand, did research and trying to just understand, neurochemicals in the brain and depression, sort of all that stuff. And I sort of started to think, all right, I'm ready to face retirement. And when I retired, I really got into parkrun. And I thought, and sport had taught me, that if I eat and sleep, I'll have the energy to exercise and I'll be good if I just keep doing that, because exercise gives endorphins, which is nature's painkiller, and I thought I was sweet. But the pandemic came, a pub, and that obviously got shut down, tremendously stressful, and I still got down, a few years after retiring, I still got super depressed and actually thought about taking my life. And it was at that moment when I thought, right, I'd figured it all out. I thought I understood what mental health was, but I still was in a really, really bad way. And that was the first time I finally spoke to my wife and I said, babe, I'm not in a good way. She said, speak to your dad. Opened up to my dad. And he said, well, let's try and find you some support. And he convinced me to get in touch with my old team, the Brumbies, who then put me in touch with a sports psychologist who herself was a triathlete that had been through that transition out of sport and understood what that does to you, the neurochemicals and the nervous system. And meeting with Gayleen, she basically helped me realise that in retirement I'd been just revving my engine too hard, trying to make my career transition work. I just hadn't allowed any time for myself. I mean, apart from exercising, I still didn't allow myself to have any fun. I thought that was unproductive, and then I just had to push to make this career transition happen. But then she also gave me this sheet. This is a photo of it with 12 unhelpful thinking habits. So there's judgment, catastrophizing, mind reading, black and white thinking, being self-critical. And she handed it to me and said, Ben, how many of these do you have? And I sort of went through and I was like, shit, I've got all 12 of them. And that really helped me realise that, I was doing all the right stuff physically, but then mentally I was just still burning all that energy with these unhelpful thinking patterns that through my life I'd started to develop. And then driving home, that was really sort of a bit of a penny drop for me to realise that mental health it's actually nervous system health. Well, that, for me, like it's something that when I was playing, that term mental health, I'm showing my age, but it was not very well understood. I think sport's doing a much better job educating athletes now about what it is and how to manage it when you retire. But for me, just reframing it and looking at around the nervous system helped me understand why good nutrition helps, why sleep helps, why exercise helps, and why community and being environments where you can be yourself and take down the mask, why that all helps, massively helps. And so then I sort of now started to think, mental health really is around sort of like your energy levels. And that, if you're out of energy, well, I think I've certainly been, and I think a lot of dads are, they burn out, they just have no energy. And I think it's because their nervous system's shot to bits, because there's lots of stuff, I think screens play a huge part of that. And just there's obviously also the system changes that we've been discussing that are just wearing men and mothers and fathers' nervous systems out. And if they can do the things, focus on doing the things that give them energy, I think that helps them be the best parents they can be and be able to give back to their communities. So I guess why, how does this tie to, why is this important to parenting? Like, I think it's pretty obvious, but the thing I've noticed with my kids as I've learned to regulate myself better and look after my nervous system, my kids, they don't care how much effort I put into work. They can feel if something's off. You don't even need to say anything. They can tell by your body. Well, my kids can tell by my body language. And that, I guess, has helped me push through this feeling of guilt that I've had around prioritising time for myself, and that it's actually, I have to do it to be able to be there for them, that I do need to make sure I've got time for myself and that I'm prioritising my health, my nervous system, my mental health, however you want to call it. I have to prioritise that so that I can come home and be the best dad I can be. But there was just a lot of guilt around that in the early days. And I guess anecdotally, just as a family, we've started to, my wife have started to look at it around that and prioritise her health. Again, this is anecdotally, but her Crohn's is in full remission, and my youngest daughter's ADHD symptoms have dissipated as I've been more and more present, more and more regulated around them. I don't know why, I don't know the research on that, but it's just something we've observed in our house. So thank you. I just want to repeat, this is just something that's really a helpful reminder for me when I'm feeling overwhelmed, is that I'm not broken. I don't have like a label or anything, like I'm just a bit run down, overwhelmed, and there's things I can do to feel better, and there's communities and services that can help me do that. So it's just something, a really reminder that I tell myself often that, I'm not broken, I'm just cooked. Sometimes, and I guess viewing it the lens through nervous system health has just helped me as a bit of a dum-dum understand what's been going on inside. So, and I genuinely think it's helped save my life. So thank you very much.
I remember my password. Good morning, everyone. What a privilege to be here in this room with all of you, and what a privilege to listen to all the research, the policy, the lived experience, the stories in the room. I'm here to share the story of community. I have a really simple message, and the message is that we don't have to do this alone. It's one we kind of all know, and while it sounds simple, I think it's harder than rocket science. I think we all know it takes a village to raise a child, but what happens when there are no villages anymore? I think the village concept isn't just for our children, but it's for each of ourselves. That our fathers need a village, our uncles need a village, our sons need a village, our wives need a village, everyone needs the village. And I think today we expect two people, and often it can fall on one person, to provide what that whole village used to provide. And then we wonder why we're all struggling and overwhelmed and maybe sometimes feel like we're failing. I wear many hats. Today I wear the hat of Australian Community Father of the Year 2024. It's a bit dated. My kids still wonder how I got the award. I remind them that they never voted for me. It was actually voted by the community of dads that we started in our little place in Belmont. But yes. This is the day my daughter Sarita was born in 2015. I like to also reflect often on it being the day that I was born as a father. I think when a child is born, a father is born, and I've heard that thread of the identity and what on earth that means to step into that role. Every time I meet a new father, I ask them, how old are you as a father? Because it doesn't matter how old you are as a bloke. How old are you as a father? And they'll tell me, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 15 years, 20 years, 64 years. Oh, wow. And this was the day that Sarita met Marley, my second child. My wife's a great photographer after birth. I don't know how she does it, really. And while everything looked really rosy on the outside, I had a promotion at work. I became a manager. Things were looking really good, but I felt like I was walking on ice. I felt like someone who professionally had studied child development and had all the books, and nothing against all the books and how helpful they all are. I think sometimes that puts pressure, and anyone here who's read the books and written the books, there's this internal pressure that we often feel like we know so much, and the gap between what we know and what we need is not there. What I didn't need was more books, more advice, more mental health help. What I felt I needed was a community. What I needed was someone else who was going through what I was going through. So in an attempt to scratch my own itch, I thought, what if I tried to start a community in my local playground? And that's what I did. This was our first meetup on the 1st of March 2020. I remember before heading out the house that morning, I turned to my wife and said, what if no dads show up? And she very wisely said to me, there'll be at least one dad there. You, get out. I look back on this, it's nearly 8 years ago, and I look back on this. My daughter was 3, my son's there on the slide, he's about 3 months old. And I kind of reflect on how it's expectation, it just happens for mothers, right? You come out of the hospital and here's your group, but for dads it's an exception. For dads we have to try and create it, and somehow we start a group and we win a national award. It's kind of insane. But what I wanted, the message is not about me, because no community is ever the work of one person, and I want to share that story with you, and I want to acknowledge all of the incredible dads that have allowed me to share this incredible story. We met for 3 weeks, and as we've heard, the world shut down. Everything shut down. The playground shut down, COVID hit, and I thought, oh my God, it's like the worst time to start a community group. But what I also realized, it was probably the most important time ever to start a community group. Our dads, I'm from Perth, Western Australia, were locked in, were locked down. We couldn't have our extended family with us. We couldn't go see our extended family. We couldn't even go to regions. People couldn't travel. I don't have to tell you. I should have given a trigger warning, but that's what happened. But whilst that could have been the end, it wasn't. We kept meeting. We kept meeting. We kept persisting. We kept going out to the playground. We wore the mask when we had to. We did what we needed to do. I look at this photo now and I'm reminded by that quote that says, your child's favourite toy is you. And suddenly, in some ways, that good news story was dads were home and they had to figure it out. So we went out on a Sunday morning in a playground and we started to catch up. And we did all sort of great things. We started to do stand-up paddleboarding with kids. We started to do fun and fit activities with our kids. We started to do music together. I'll just share this one. It was a lady who runs workshops for dads and their kids, and she'd never ran one just for dads. She always said, I would run it as a workshop in a local community centre, and we'd always have 1 or 2 dads there. And I asked her, what was that like? And she said, oh my God, I've never heard those songs with that bass. But there was something about that bass. There was something about that bass, that primal energy, that thing that maybe, what is our role? What does it feel like when the masculine energy is in that room and it's playful? Look at that. We did something called Decorate with Dad, and we did cupcakes. One of our dad's partners ran a cupcake business, and she said, I want to run this for you. And we said, absolutely, And this bloke right here was his birthday, separated on his own, and he didn't tell anyone that it was his birthday. And of course, with the final cake, we all sang him a happy birthday. And we kept meeting and we kept meeting. The pictures tell 1,000 words. Something was forming. There was a connection. There was a community that was growing. And there was this side-by-side thing that I started to learn. I wasn't doing research, I was part of the research. I was listening, I was sharing. It wasn't a place where we were giving advice, it was a place that we were sharing experience and kind of holding us through what we were going on. You know, we were running around in the playgrounds, and it was often in these moments where you wouldn't expect to actually hear how someone was struggling would be when you would start to hear they were struggling. And sometimes it wasn't about a fix. It wasn't about going to see someone. It was just about having someone else there that knew what you were going through. And maybe it wasn't about the lack of strength or the lack of determination for fathers. Maybe it was the lack of connection. Here were some of those private moments. One of our blokes who attended a Father's Day walk that we ran every year. When COVID happened, most of the country couldn't run Man with a Pram, but we did. And he went back to the mines and he popped the sticker on and he said, you know, it just helped me to remember while I was alone out there in the mines that there was a community waiting at home for me. Here was another bloke that wrote a comment on the group. I'd like to come, but I don't know anyone. How will I know it's a group? I'm not great introducing myself to strangers. And someone said, there'll be a sign stuck in the grass. I went a few weeks ago, just walk over and say hello. And that's how we kind of did it. It was really organic, no organisation behind it, just a bunch of blokes wanting to do it. This was a powerful moment. All a dad did was he saw the shirt at Red Dot and he popped it on the Facebook as an anonymous member. And that was when the conversation started to happen underneath. I felt like that when I saw that message, and I think there are many days where our dads feel like that. So we started to shift. I started to think maybe if we had the right conditions, as you've heard earlier, that the fathers might be able to start talking. So we started to focus. There's already a lot of great things that are happening out there. We started to go, all right, let's do some running together. So we did the HBF Run for a reason, which meant we had to train because all of us were a bunch of, how do we tell the different story of the dad bod? How do we actually say maybe the dad bod is about looking after our own fitness, because if we look after ourselves, then we can look after our families, right? Then we can be out there and we're not puffing and we're running out of breath. You know, Are You OK Day, the push-up challenge. Movember, if I knew you were here, Zac, I'd put up all the moustaches that our dad started to do. So online, wherever they were across WA, they started to link into this power of community. And then there were the times that we spent just with ourselves and not with our kids. And that was when some magic started to really happen, where we got to really look internally for ourselves and get to hear from each other what was going on in this inner world. This was where I started to wonder that maybe mental health is not an individual problem or issue. In a lot of First Nation culture, when someone in their community or their village is struggling, what they say is, thank you for showing us what our community is struggling with. You are an expression of that. And perhaps what we might need to look at is the social health and the community health. Loneliness, we know, is one of the greatest diseases and challenges in our society. It's linked to all of the things that we've heard today. How do we start to link up our blokes? Especially in the world of fathering. It's not just peer-to-peer either. It's intergenerational. We linked up with the Belmont Men's Shed. We hung out with them. They put a whole PowerPoint for us and told us all of their stories. And I realised, we've got the same story. We're trying to link to a community of other blokes along a different phase of identity. And they said, mate, we're all flopping down and we need some younger blokes. So we're about to set up the Belmont Dad Shed, because we don't really have those houses with the sheds where we can fix up the bike. So we need our grandfathers. And maybe if we don't have our own grandfathers, we might be able to borrow from others. Because yes, said earlier, it's not just about the fathers, it's about the father figures in the community that sits around them. This was when my kids graduated from the pram and moved to the school years. This was the village that we created back in 2023 at our last event. And that's when I followed my kids. My goal was never to start a group. My goal was to follow my kids and have a community around me along the way. And then I heard about the incredible work of the Fathering Project, and we started a dad's group at our school. This was our first event called Paper, Planes and Pizzas. They said there'll be no dads that show up. Check that out. What I've learned is in the early years, the dads brought the kids out, right? We brought them out in the pram, we carried them, we wrestled with them. But in the school years, the kids were bringing the dads out. Daddy, I want to go to the pizza party. And it felt like I was evolving along the way as well. Whatever the pressures were that I was experiencing, I know that they need it and they wanted me there. This was the other event that we ran last year called Handball and Hot Dogs. We like to keep things simple. And I think, to close, I think that it might feel simple, but it's really powerful, and there are so many communities that sit around us and our fathers, and how can we connect them to those communities? Dads might not walk into a service or a program, but they will walk into a school oval, they will walk into a hall, they will go to the sports club, they will gather around a barbecue, and that's where we need to meet them. And if anyone thinks that we can't engage with dads, I hope that I've been able to change your mind. Why dad alone when we can dad together? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian, for the really important research and the work that you're doing. And Ben, for your beautiful, heartfelt, genuine story. Thank you. And Shaun, for a great example of what can be done. And I have to say, I've done lots of work with men, boys, girls, different groups. When we can get fathers together with their children doing an activity, for me, that is the greatest magic that we see anywhere. So, love hearing all that. Okay, we have a bit of time before morning tea for some questions. If anybody would like to ask a question, we've got Maggie Dent.
Yeah,
Not just anybody, Maggie Dent.
Parenting author, educator and boy champion and man champion. Ian, I want to direct this one to you because this has come up quite often when either I've been counselling or working with a group of men in a sharing shed, is that exactly what we've touched on here a little, they wish they'd been a bit better prepared for what would happen when they were going to become the dad. Not only, it's not the game book, in actual fact what they tell me is, I lost my wife. I became so lonely, and then I felt like a spare leg, and it was the loneliness of missing it. And now that after we've listened to Shaun, you can see what can happen when there's this opportunity for us to hang out with others, because we're wired as a social species for human connectedness. And I feel the loneliness that because we know that boys and men don't have estrogen as much as us girls, so you're not good at bonding. And one of my most popular blogs was Fragile Boy Friendships. Well, is loneliness something that you think is underlying around the degree of depression that can happen in that first year of the first time they're a dad?
Yeah, look, I think that touches on a few points, particularly around how people communicate within relationships and how we communicate in general when it comes to being dysregulated. So when guys transition into fatherhood and they do feel like there's a gap that's widening between them and their partner, and there's a loss of intimacy and there's a loss of connectedness, they are likely to come at that in a communication style that is not productive. And I'd hazard a guess that the other side of this is also coming at the conversation in a way that's not productive. And so what you start to do is the same old dance time and time and time again, where nobody actually is understood and validated, and nobody is trying to hurt the other, but they're not getting on the same page in terms of what's going on. And I think having communities like, a dad's community to lean into actually fills some of that space. And so I think it's about broadening the depth of connection we have across different frameworks, because resources are limited, and anyone who has young kids in the house knows, that's just the reality. And our brains are a resource system. So as soon as we don't have the capacity to meet needs, we have to find that in other spaces, because there will be conflict. Just terrible at communication in most instances. And so we just get worse and worse and worse. And that's where depression and other things sort of emerge.
Thank you. And may I also add, if anybody wants to address a question to Dan Rapicoli, who's here, we can do that as well.
Yeah, I've been taking notes. So I have a question for one of the panel members. Can't remember which one. You were saying that the men in this room, some of them are other types of caregivers, just other than just being fathers. I'm just wondering if you could run us through what are some of the other caring roles that men can play.
Thank you. That was definitely me, that one. There's lots of other roles that men can play for caregiving. It can be a sports coach, a mentor. It can be your uncle. It can be your grandfather taking you through and showing you how to repair the puncture on your push bike. There's so many areas there. And it can even be your brother. It can be an older brother, an older sibling, taking you through that path as well of you going through a different part of your life. So it is, caregiving from males is a really important thing, whether it's a coach, a mentor, a father figure that may not be your father, but is treating you like they're your father as well. That it is so important that we broaden this out to all males and all caregivers, and even to other males that aren't caregivers for same-sex marriages and same-sex partnerships as well. Some females actually get left behind here because one of the people in that same-sex partnership takes control. So the other person's quite often left behind there as well. So this is an area that does certainly need to be worked on, and that we just need to open our horizons a little bit and broaden our the way we look at this, and I think that will make a major difference.
Thank you. Very important. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you for your fantastic presentations and messages. I'm Derek. I'm father of Evie and Orla, stepdad to Leo, Hal and Luke. I'm also the director of Raising Children Network. My question is around culture. We have such great examples of community, of individual resilience, but I keep thinking about media and culture. We see the media landscape changing dramatically. Any comments from anybody on the panel about what we can look forward to, try to be optimistic, about the media landscape and role models for that?
You might have a bit more to say around media landscapes, given that you were, the spotlight.
I don't know. Let me have a think. I don't know. Maybe it's the... I actually don't know what to say. I don't have an answer. Shaun, what do you got to say?
What do I have to say? I don't know. I think there's something around the sphere of influence that we have, and I think we can often feel quite overwhelmed in this new world that we're all trying to navigate, where something that happens somewhere in the world feels like it's happening right in your room. I think about my children around the cultural landscape that's changing, and how to equip them with how to think about things rather than what to think. I'm hopeful. I think we need to remain hopeful. I work in the area of childhood trauma. So I think that's one of the most important places for us to continue to adapt and evolve, and why we need to support the caregivers, the systems, the organisations, so that we can really look after our children who will be, tomorrow, the fathers and mothers of tomorrow. So I think this summit is starting to do that. I think we can influence and shift culture from the bottom up rather than allow it to change us from the top down.
I think we probably also can't mention media without talking about social media and the influence that has, and it's not in the best interest of our young fathers or our children. And thank goodness in Australia we have decided that kids under 16 are not allowed to be on social media, and even if some of them still are, at least that's a significant statement, which is very, very positive. But I definitely think that, we have a lot of work to do there, so thank you for bringing that into the space. Thank you. Carmen, did you have a question? You just bought a house at an auction if you were at one.
Actually, it was for Shaun. I'm just wondering, as the kids get into adolescence, I don't know if they are already, but do you see yourselves shifting the model? What's it going to be? Hamburgers and
Yeah,
what's the alliterative?
It's a good question. I think, people like the Fathering Project do evolve that model from the primary school into the high school years. My daughter was a 10-ager. I really like that concept. I think the idea of adolescence is coming in earlier and earlier with the cultural shift and trying to figure, that's not what I had back in the day. So I don't know what it's going to look like when they're adolescents, but, if I was going to build a big skyscraper, we want to start with those foundations, and I'm hoping that we can collectively do that as well as we can, so we can navigate things as they get there. But watch this space.
Shaun, this one's for you as well. I'm Erin Essig, the manager of the research at the Fathering Project. I just wanted to ask you about when I look at that photo and we know that children are the big motivator to bring fathers into that space, and they come in hordes with their children.
How did you find the experience going through with those dads and your dads in your groups, and then going to just dads only events? You know, was there a drop off with some fathers not feeling as comfortable in that space? Did it time? Did you have to build their trust? What was the progression there from your direct experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when dads come with their kids, they can come in however way they would like to. You know, they can be out there one-on-one with their kid and they're still kind of parallel playing. I think when it's individual, there is a sense of, for me, how I call it dadvertising. I don't think mental health and suicide and family violence are ways to engage fathers. I think fathers seek connection, check-ins, you know, a footy club. I think we need that third thing, you know, that we're doing. I think for women, you know, let's catch up and you and I can catch up. For us, we might need the fishing or the cooking, the footy, whatever it is, that third thing. So for me, that was always the attempt to try and work out for the dads what we were kind of gathering around. And then I guess when there's a sense of safety and trust when we start from a bigger group with our kids, it feels easier because you already know the person that's in front of you.
And I would just like to plant the seed before we have morning tea that these kids are all sort of pre-pubescent, and that is, you know, and at that stage, dad is a superhero. It doesn't automatically stay that way once they become 14, 15, 16, 17, as we probably know. And I think that the fathering sort of has two stages. There's the childhood fathering, and then there's the adolescent on. And as importantly, we need to think about how can we maintain fathers' relationships with their children through those critical years? Because what happens to the children in those critical years actually can impact on them for the rest of their lives. So I think, you know, hopefully that's a piece of research, and for me that's where the rites of passage and that sort of intervention comes in, and it's a really important thing that I think we haven't really managed so well here. So I'll just pop that in there. Thank you. Okay, we're going to have some morning tea. We've got half an hour. Really encourage you to say hello to someone who you haven't met, and we'll meet back here at 11:30. Thank you very much, and thank you to our panel.